Hi everybody, we're here at Sunset Station with Chuck Esposito, Director of Race and Sports, and it's tournament time. We're very excited for March Hoops to begin. It's finally here. Chuck, we wanted to get some of your insight on the tournament, what's going to be happening, some of the chatter that's going on, so if you don't mind, we'll get right into it.
Yeah, it's an exciting time for us. It's one of our favorite times of year. It is the crowds, the atmosphere, the electricity in the sports books. If you haven't experienced it, you have to come out and give it a shot. It's really phenomenal. I think you go into this year's tournament and you've got two overwhelming, I think, #1 seeds, and that's Virginia and Villanova. And those are our two big favorites on the big board. But I think you look at the other two #1 seeds. You look at Kansas and Xavier. Neither one of those schools is even the favorite in their region. Xavier, the first time they've ever been a #1 seed, they're not the favorite in their region. You look at some of the other schools that are there, very competitive, very tough. I think looking at Villanova in the East, I think they have the easiest road to get to the Final Four, but I think Kansas has the toughest road to get to the Final Four, and there's a lot of teams right now that are playing really well that show a lot of value going into round one.
Yeah, leading into that, there seems to be a lot of talk about how it's pretty open this year. There's a lot of opportunities for a lot of teams. When we're talking about dark horses, do you see that from your end?
Yeah, I think there always is. I think you look at the tournament as a whole, and that gap between David and Goliath has really narrowed. There's still some Cinderella stories. I think you can make a really good case for 15 or 20 schools to win it. I think you are going to see some surprises in the Sweet 16, and I think a lot of it is that some of the smaller schools, you've got kids that have been together for 3 and 4 years, and we've seen that over the last couple of years in the tournament. Point spreads are a lot smaller. You don't see as many big numbers in the first 2 rounds, and unfortunately, a lot of the majors, kids are gone after a year. So these these smaller schools, these kids think, I got a chance, and the longer they play in that game, that they're competitive, the longer they believe, and a lot of times the louder the crowd gets in the sports book when Cinderella is knocking on the door.
So there is a lot of potential for some first-round upsets, potentially some of these smaller schools that have these kids for 3-4 years versus the 1 year, one-and-done type of teams. Are any teams in particular that stands out as possible first-round upsets?
Yeah, there absolutely is. I think you look at a team like Loyola Chicago, who's really good. They can score from the inside and the outside. I think they're one of those schools that I believe they had 27 or 28 wins this year. You look at New Mexico State. There's some small schools that really have played well, and I think there's some value with those teams, but that's what makes the tournament so great. Every year we have one of those stories, one of those teams that nobody expects to get to the Sweet 16. Every year you've got that 5 against 12 matchup where 12s are winning. How many of those will happen this year? Will there be a couple of upsets in the 5 versus 12s? So there's always that potential on the board.
Yeah, and so on the flip side of that, are there any teams that stood out when the rankings came out that maybe just got a little bit too much respect?
Well, I think I was surprised that Oklahoma got as much respect as they did. I know early in the season they played really well, but they really fell off towards the end of the season. The fact that Arizona State and Syracuse were both in, but say St. Mary's and USC or Notre Dame weren't. I was at the Pac-12 games on Friday night. I was really surprised that USC didn't get in. I thought being the #2 team in that conference, I was stunned that they didn't get in. And there's teams that are playing well coming into the tournament. Arizona, who I think has kind of a chip on their shoulder maybe, played with a cloud over their head, some adversity. They're playing really well right now. San Diego State, who beat Nevada. I think they've won 7 games in a row. They're playing well. So there are some schools that come in red hot. You look at a Texas Tech team, a Houston team, teams that a lot of people didn't expect to be so good, but are really, really good right now.
That's great. So, Chuck, we talked about a few of the teams, some favorites, some dark horses, but let everybody know who are some fun players to watch throughout the tournament.
There are some great players to watch. I think DeAndre Ayton has one. I mean, not only maybe the best big player in the country right now, but maybe the best player in the country. The way he's playing right now, maybe a potential first-round draft pick. Porter, back for Missouri. Everyone wants to see how he kind of fits in with Missouri. You've got the Martin twins for Nevada. And then you've got the guard play from Villanova with Bridges and Brunson. I mean, their guard play is phenomenal. Their guard play is so strong, that might be what wins them the tournament. I think you look at those guys, there's a ton of kids that I can talk about right now, but those are kind of 5 that really stand out to me that I want to watch, and the way they play is going to dictate a lot how the tournament flows.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so for looking ahead to Thursdays and Fridays games, if you had to really pick one maybe two games that stand out as some really must-watch games, what would you say some of those games on Thursday and Friday would be?
There are some great games. I think you look at the way that Texas against Nevada, I think that's a really intriguing matchup. Nevada did lose out here. They lost to San Diego State, but they've played really well this year. Musselman's a really good coach against Shaka Smart in Texas. I mean, that's a really good coaching matchup, I think, for a game that's really close to almost pick 'em. I think you look at Davidson and Kentucky, as athletic and as well as Kentucky's playing, they look into the mirror and what do they see? Davidson, a team that plays just like them. They're very athletic, they can rebound a lot, and they can give them some trouble on the glass. There are some great games, though. I'm really looking forward to watching a lot of these early games, seeing some of these small schools play. As I've mentioned earlier, a lot of the point spreads are a lot closer, so you see some really compelling matchups, and I do expect some upsets the very first day.
That's great. It's really exciting, and we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but we kind of do. Looking ahead to the second round matchups, there's some really intriguing possibilities. Who stands out as some really fun second round matchups?
There are two, I think, great matchups if it works out that way. I think the committee did a great job both in the South and the East, 4 versus 5. In the South, you could potentially have Arizona, who's playing maybe better than anybody in the country right now, against another red-hot team in Kentucky. How much fun would that game be to watch with the history of those two schools? And then in the East, you've got West Virginia with Huggy as coach and the way they play defense against that disciplined Wichita State team. Again, a 4 versus 5. I think both those two matchups, potentially on Saturday and Sunday, are tremendous if it works out that way.
Okay, Chuck, that was great. And now we have a lot of good information to arm ourselves going into opening weekend, but now it's the fun part, actually watching the games. Now, some tips maybe for some locals or people coming to visit in Vegas. Where can they watch the games? Where can they get the full experience?
Fun, but it's also stressful, but it is a lot of fun. At all of our race and sports books, I think the atmosphere in the book is second to none. The reinvestment that we've put in our books as far as the video presentation goes is second to none. But Red Rock, GVR, Palace Station are all having tremendous viewing parties outside of their race and sports book. Many of our properties are offering different promotions and giveaways, and of course, phenomenal food and beverage specials. It's just an unbelievable atmosphere. So many guests tell me, I come out every year just for those days of the tournament, just for those first 4 days. I recommend get here early, camp out if you want, get one of those seats, because every one of those seats is at center court. So it's a phenomenal experience. If you haven't done it, you got to come out and have some fun.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you again to Chuck Esposito. And be sure to tune in next week as we talk about the final 16 teams in the tournament.